Hi, this is a quick demo of how to get registered for the virtual career fair. This demo is part of an overall workshop that was done. The slides for the overall workshop and the recording of that workshop are available at the URLs you see here. I'm Susan Martin, the Program Director for PhD Career Development. I'm part of the Graduate School and the University Career Center and the President's Promise. My graduate assistant, April Fuller, and I conduct workshops year-round to help PhDs and postdocs manage their careers. This particular demo is all about how to get set up to attend virtual career fairs. And there are 4 resources that you see linked here. There is actually a guide, a handout that I'll be following. There's an instruction guide. There's a demo. This recording is at the URL you see here. And the 4th recording was done by the company called Simplicity. That's the name of the platform that Careers for Terps, Careers for Engineers, and Maryland Policy Jobs all use. So they have developed a virtual career fair module that we're using for a number of fairs this year. So what I'm going to do is I am going to be actually following the instruction guide to get my C4T account set up and get myself registered for the fair. If you're interested in all of the other career fair prep events, check out the handout. There are a variety of ways you can get your resume critiqued, workshops that you can attend to really get ready for the fair. All right, so let me go into, I'm going to show you how to set up your account so that you can register for the virtual fair. And all of the fairs that are held this year will happen in the same way. So you want to start by clicking on students, and you'll be asked to authenticate through the CAS authentication system. If you're an alum and don't have a password, click Forget Password. So there's 2 things you need to do. The first thing you need to do is you need to update the academic and career part of your profile. So this section of Careers for Terps is going to feed what employers see about you at the virtual fair. So you want to make sure that your graduation date, your program, your work authorization, your career interests, all of that is updated, okay? If you speak any other languages, and again, this is quite simple. So go through and update that and save it, okay? The second thing you want to do is you want to click on External Portfolio. Again, the fields here are the things that feed what an employer can see about you at the virtual fair. So of course you want to update a photo. So let's see if my photo is the right size. Where am I? Oh, I'm actually going to look in my downloads because okay. So let me open this. It's loading my photo. Let me save that. Okay, so now I have a photo in my profile. Please, please, please. Let it update it. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to do is make sure that I have an updated resume in there, because the employers are going to be able to see your default resume. So at the fair, you will get into different queues, up to 5 at one time, where you will be able to have a 5-minute video chat with an employer. The employers will have a chance to review your resume really quickly before they invite you into the chat. So make sure that the default resume is the one you want them to see. So I'm going to add a new resume, and it's as simple as labeling it. So I'll call it your name. That's always a good thing. Susan Martin, resume. Okay, and then I choose the file, and I'm going to upload this. Okay. So there's my resume. That's my default resume. All right. So once you get your profile updated and your resume uploaded, you are now going to go to Center Events and you're going to click on Career Fairs. And all of the different career fairs that are here, they're right here. Now you'll notice there are 3 days to this fall fair. You must register for each one individually. So let's say I'm going to attend day 2. I'd click on day 2. Here's what employers are going to see about me, right? So I am going to click attend. Now, the chat feature, the video chat feature, during the day of the fair, this will be where you'll say that you're online. There's my resume, there's my profile. I'm going to save all of that. Now, right now, you can see that there are 104 employers attending the fair. So if I click on all, I get to see all the employers and I can star any of the ones that I'm interested in, okay? Now you'll notice it says I'm attending here. So employers will have a list of all of the attendees that got into their queue to have a video chat. You will have the contact information for all of the employers after the fair. You will have a list, you'll have contact information for the ones that you entered their queue. Okay. So I am just going to click on Amazon Web Services, for example. This gives me a chance to click through to their website and view any positions. So right now, they haven't posted any positions into Careers for Terps or Careers for Engineers or UMD policy jobs. But remember, the employers are also all getting ready for the fair. So on the back end, employers are loading in to C4T who from their recruiting teams are going to be attending. They're setting up how many minutes the virtual chats will be. And so they're also being encouraged to upload jobs that they have open, okay? So again, this just gives you a chance to see all of the things that you can learn about an employer, okay? So I need to go back to the fair. So let me go back here, home. I have this upcoming event. So when I click on this, let's see what happens. It takes me back into it so I can again look at employers. So preparation for the fair means registering, setting up your profile, uploading your CV. It means watching those videos to get comfortable with this environment. And it also means checking in to see what positions are posted either on the employer website or in C4T, C4E, etc. And again, for most PhDs, there probably are just going to be a handful of companies that you want to check in with. Remember, not all organizations are not there every day. So if there's someone you really want to connect with, make sure that you attend that day, and you have to register for each day of the fair. So this was a really, really quick overview. Remember, there are these 4 different resources that can help you get familiar with this environment. I know it feels weird right now, but being able to get comfortable in the virtual environment is an essential skill for job seekers. It is going to continue to be even beyond this pandemic. So take the time to register for the days of the fair and show up, practice. I encourage you to go and watch the recording of the entire workshop that I did on leveraging career fairs. And I want to remind you, if you have any questions at all, to please schedule an appointment with me in Careers for Terps, or just reach out to me or April Fuller, and we'll get back to you. Thanks, and good luck at the fair.